Thank you, Honor. It's really exciting to be here today. And welcome to all of you who are out there. I feel like I'm doing a radio show out there in Radio Land. So we are ready to move forward. And how interesting that my screen is frozen. There we go. I wanted to give you an idea of my background. I have 25 years experience as a principal at the elementary and middle school level, and I left the principalship about 6 years ago, and now I'm a consultant and a trainer, and I work quite a bit for NAESP and NHASP, and that's New Hampshire. That's where I'm from. I'm in New Hampshire right now. It's freezing as usual. We had a huge snowstorm again yesterday, and that canceled the class that I do in curriculum and instruction at Plymouth State, which is one of our colleges here in New Hampshire. And I also work as a fellow at the University of Pennsylvania. But what I really, really like in my life is being Mimi to little Hudson, Liliana, and Angelo, and there I am in the bottom in Nob Hill where my son and daughter-in-law live, and I'm in the little park in front of Grace Cathedral, if any of you have ever been out there in beautiful San Francisco. So we have some essential questions that we will address today, and they are as follows. What is the relevance of rigor? How does the NAESP Rigor Rubric work? A little bit about research, and a bit about how you can coach teachers to employ rigor in their instruction. So, one of the things that has happened in the past couple of years is that NAESP, in conjunction with Chris Mason and the Center for Educational Improvement, has created a rigor rubric, and this is a rubric that is really an excellent tool in many different ways. First of all, the tool can be used by you to help you understand what it is you're looking for when you're trying to encourage rigor in your classroom. It's probably even more useful for teams of teachers because colleagues can definitely use this with one another, and a teacher can use this with him or herself to do some spot checking on their own efforts to increase academic rigor. Of course, one of the ways to really promote good practice with the Common Core, and if you're not a Common Core state, to promote good practice with whatever standards you're following, is to increase academic rigor. So I want to show you a little tiny piece of the rubric because I think this gives an idea, first of all, that the categories line up nicely with Charlotte Danielson's evaluation. But this is not necessarily an evaluation. I would call it more of a guide. But if you look at this particular aspect of the rubric, this little small piece is about student goal setting. And of course, we always like to look at the exemplary version of it. And if you were in a classroom where you saw that not only the students set goals related to the class's content and skills, but they monitor their own progress towards the goals, and they discuss that progress with their teacher and peers. And I have been in classrooms where this is a common practice, and I'm absolutely floored at how insightful kids can be about their own learning. It's amazing. And if you think of starting at the beginning level where maybe students aren't even setting any goals, and working your way through the 4 levels, if you get to that final level as a teacher, you're doing a great job. So, what do we know about rigor? Well, what we know is all over the place, because if you did this activity, and you can do this with your staff, hand out some index cards and just ask them to write their own definition of rigor you'll see that there's quite a bit going on out there in terms of people's concepts of what rigor is. But if you keep passing the cards around and let people add and modify and then work together as a group to come up with a definition, you'll come up with something pretty good. But, you know, this takes about 15 minutes and a lot of swapping around of those cards. But let's take a look at this from another angle. What about a rigorous curriculum? We would want to have a rigorous curriculum for the ultimate goal of having self-directed students. And self-directed students have these kind of features. This is what we love to see with kids. We love to see all of these going on with students. And we want to have kids in the thinking game. It's very complex for them to be aware of their own thinking, but they certainly can enjoy learning, and rigor does not in any way interfere with just the pure fun of learning at school. So the rubric itself, there are, in our rubric, rigor is broken down 4 ways. And those 4 ways are metacognition, deep understanding, higher level thinking, and solving problems. And so all of these things are going on simultaneously in the student's mind. And all of these things can easily be done by the youngest students you may have in the school. And so thinking a little bit more about the rubric, I want to tell you one of the features is that there's an annotated bibliography. And when I say annotated, what I mean is that for every single resource that's listed, and there's books, articles, websites, YouTube videos, a nice blend of things, but there's a little descriptor on each one, which I really like because then it's so much easier for me to look through an annotated bibliography and I can read what's there and not necessarily have to go look at every single resource. So some of the resources are by the guru of rigor, and that's Barbara Blackburn, and she often works with Ron Williamson. And here are some of her books which are reviewed. And in Barbara's definition, she keeps it simple. She says students are expected to learn at high levels, they're supported while learning at high levels, and then they demonstrate learning at high levels. And this is what the rubric picks up, is the demonstration part. What does it look like if a student is learning at high levels? Another example from the annotated bibliography is a research report from McRell. I love McRell. They do such fine work. And what I've done is I've taken a 72-page report and reduced it to 5 words. So McRell talks about how everybody knows the studies on expectations, and if teachers have very high expectations, then the students work much better and reach them and so forth. But what McRell found out is that despite all the knowledge that we have about expectations, that nationwide teachers have low expectations. And McRell also in research said that the approach when you really want to beef up achievement is to use the our kids approach, that every student and every student's issues belong to everybody. And so in summation, they think that educators should be warm demanders. So there's everyone working together. Daggett's work, rigor, relevance, and relationships, very key to rigor, and basically he almost could have called it relationships, 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 because without that foundational relationship, really the students aren't very interested in rigor. So I've included some quotes from famous people, and this famous person is actually somebody who wrote and has written, still writing, 50 novels, 200 short stories. And when he was a boy, his dad went out for a pack of cigarettes, and he never came back, leaving the mom and 2 boys alone to struggle. But one thing that he did leave behind was a book called The Lurker in the Shadows. And it had a really creepy book jacket. And that is what got this gentleman so interested in writing. So let's move on to metacognition. And what is it? It's the process of planning, assessing, and monitoring one's own thinking. Now, from the rubric, these are the sections that talk about what goes on for the teacher when they are promoting metacognition and what is happening with the student. And we are about to watch a brief clip. It's about 3.5 minutes, and we're going to use the rating scale listed there. And I'm going to ask you, I'm going to poll you afterwards to see what would be your rating. Of course, you don't have the rubric in front of you and so forth, so you're just kind of guessing at what it would be. And we are going to be doing a little pretending because we're seeing a lesson in 3.5 minutes rather than 45 minutes or an hour or however long a lesson might ordinarily be. So here we go. This lesson is on gaze aversion, and before we begin, I would like for you to think about something really complicated, or maybe I'll give you an example, but what I'm wanting you to do is figure out, are you averting your eyes in any particular direction when you're thinking about something? So think about this for a minute. Who are the first 3 people you spoke to today? Did you go left or right? So let's take a look at gaze aversion. The music might be a little loud, but I think you'll appreciate the volume when we get into the text here. This is a best practices video on the teaching channel, and these people happen to be in Scotland, where a lot of research has been done on gaze aversion. Well, I'm getting some feedback from Honor that it's difficult to hear that particular video, especially with the accent. So what they're showing is that they're teaching the children gaze aversion. In other words, they're showing them that when you're thinking about something, if you shift your eyes to one side or another, 2 things happen. One, it's a cue to the instructor that you are thinking, that you don't want them to move on. Like, consider yourself in an interview situation. Somebody might pose a question to you, and you shift your eyes for a moment, and that's a subconscious signal to others that you do intend to answer, but you need a moment to collect your thoughts. Interestingly, shifting your eyes is actually a cognitive tool that when you do shift your eyes to one side or the other, it assists in your thinking. So these children are being taught how to do that. And they go on, the children go on to say it really helps them, and they can have a good think time when they move their eyes to one side. And that's basically what this is about. So I want to move ahead to the poll, and imagine that you had just seen a lesson like this in a classroom, let's say of primary age children, and that you were going to assess, and I'm trying to move this forward here, my PowerPoint, so that you can assess and you can actually use your poll on your bar there to assess it as beginning, developing, accomplished, or exemplary.
And I've already launched, I've launched the poll for you.
Okay, and oh, they're seeing it, yes. Okay.
You're seeing it right now. So if you'll just take a moment to go ahead and fill it in. And again, could you again Kathleen, go over what the levels mean?
So let's say that the teacher, you and the teacher had agreed that you wanted the children to improve their metacognition. And so would this technique of teaching them to use gaze aversion, would you consider that beginning, developing, accomplished, or exemplary? And if we had a rubric, it's much more clearly defined. But we're just going to keep it simple for our brief little time this afternoon.
I think a couple of people are experiencing problems because they said they didn't see enough of the lesson to really judge.
That's true. I just thought that
we didn't really.
I know. And we probably, these lessons are going to be very brief. But just for the polling purposes, just see if you can even do the poll. How are we doing with that? Are we ready to move on?
I think we probably should just move on this one. I don't think people are comfortable on this particular one.
Okay, great. All right. So I'm going to escape for a minute because things are a little frozen, and let me move on. And so I want to show you one more, and I hope the volume will be better on this one. This is called My Favorite No, and it's a math technique. And I'm not necessarily demonstrating like, oh, this is the best metacognitive technique. What I'm asking for you is, once again, to look at this technique and rate whether or not you think the teacher is making a connection to the student's thinking.
Hi, my name is Mia Okra. I teach 8th grade math, and this is my warm-up routine that I do with my students almost every day. I call it my favorite no. Good morning. Your warm-up is on the board. I'm going to hand out your index card. I put a warm-up problem on the board. Hand out index cards to all the kids. Have them write their answer. I collect it, and then I sort it. And I say yes, no, yes, no. And I look for my favorite wrong answer and my favorite no. And we analyze that. 4 minutes and 4 minutes. Everyone makes mistakes. You're going to see your mistakes, you're going to see my mistakes. But a mistake is your opportunity to share with me how much you understand. And if I don't know that you don't know something, I need to teach you before the test. The test is too late. And this is a great spot for me to teach you. Make sure you put your pencil in your pencil slot and have your cards. I started my warm-up routine to replace clickers that a lot of classes are buying. So that was a clicker for each student. You ask a question, they lock in an answer. And then you look at your computer screen and you know what percentage of your students understand the problem. Well, we didn't have the money for that, so instead, okay, here we go. I thought we would give everyone index cards collected them real quick with their answers already written on it, and then I can just sort them as quick as possible and find out what percentage of my kids know the answer. No? Yes? Cost 30 cents instead of $15,000. Yes, so we have quite a few yeses and some very interesting notes. 1, 2, 3. I then took that a step further, something I couldn't do with clickers. 7. Look at the ones who are getting it wrong. How far are they from getting it right? And showing that work to the other kids. Okay, my favorite no. Someone wrote this. I think it's my favorite rule because I want the kids to first of all recognize what they're about to see is wrong, and I want them to recognize that there's something good in the problem. Like there's a mistake, but it's my favorite note because it showed some good math. So that's the wrong answer. But there's some things that I love. What in that problem am I happy to see? We always talk about what's right first, so that if it's any student's work, they are like, oh, I did do that right. There's a mistake, but the mistake didn't ruin the whole thing. What did I like about this problem? Well, they distributed this with the 4x and the -2. Right? And what today's lesson was on factoring. So I needed to make sure they understood how they distribute. They distributed, and what lets you know that they distributed? Did it? How there no more parentheses? There are no more parentheses. And they didn't just drop the parentheses. So you're asked to distribute a term with a variable. You're asked to distribute twice. They're asked to distribute a term with a negative sign, which is often a very common mistake that kids make. And my students do not. Like, I have 2 years of CST data now to show that one mistake my students do not make is distributing a negative, which is amazing because they used to all the time. Distributing a negative 2 to -6 is positive 12. And that was one mistake I was absolutely looking for and I did not see, which made me very happy. Not until the very end, as we've gone over different sections of the problem that are right, that I was then asked, okay, now what is incorrect? What does this person not understand? Where's the mistake? If I get a third of my class raising their hand, ready to tell me the mistake. But it's pretty high engagement at that point. And this 4x times 2x multiplies to 8x squared. Can someone convince me of that? How do we know that 4x times 2x is 8x squared? Then low-level students are very engaged. They feel like they're not getting penalized for doing wrong. They're not being made fun of. I'm not looking at them. There's no peer pressure at this point. But they're like, wow, that's my mistake. And now I understand. It's very comforting. I mean, I feel very with my kids at all times. I'm not surprised by what they don't know. They're not surprised by what they don't know. It's how it should be. It creates more of a dialogue with me and them.
I'm going to take another poll to rate my favorite no as a metacognitive technique. Would you say the teacher was at the beginning, developed, accomplished, or exemplary level in encouraging metacognition in her class? And I would like, if you feel that there are some suggestions that you might have made to strengthen it, would you please type them in? Be able to do.
I'll share the results. Kathleen, it looks like 100% of participants rated developing.
Developing. Okay, great. Now, here's the interesting part for the principal or supervisor, because when you rated a teacher developing, and that's fine, she's going to want to know, well, what can I do to strengthen my lesson? So what would your answer be? What would you say to her? Yes.
She could have actually, couldn't she have used some of the technique you were talking about, the metacognition, to see if students were still thinking about it before she moved on?
That's true. I noticed because she said, if I have a third of my class prepared to answer, I think that's good. But maybe she needs to look at having a higher percentage of
that's
class.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, was, you know, that she kind of ran through it a little bit fast. I mean, I know this was a short clip, but I'm not sure if she really checked for understanding.
Okay, then, so here's another famous person's quote about thinking. And this is an individual who had a lot of difficulty with reading and writing as a student. However, he ultimately did make it into West Point. However, his first year didn't go that well, and he failed the first year in West Point, and he had to repeat it. He's an Olympian in the 1912 Olympics, and he competed in the pentathlon, and there he is, and that's George Patton. So on we go to deep understanding. Deep understanding is the capacity to use information to solve problems, create new ideas, generalize, reflect, and hypothesize. So in the rubric, if a teacher is working towards deep understanding, then they're going to give multiple and varied perspectives, use multiple representations, identify and correct misconceptions, and also just have good content knowledge, making it relevant and applying 21st century knowledge and skills. Student behavior will have to do with multiple and varied perspectives, also identifying their own misconceptions and correcting them. They, too, would demonstrate good content knowledge and expertise given their level, also back to 21st century knowledge and skills. So we're going to take a look at a technique that a teacher uses, and what she's trying to do is help students understand decimals. And she uses a game to do so, and the game is called Fill 2. So let's take a look, and once again, you'll use the rating scale to see how this is going in terms of academic rigor.
My name is Sonia Boyer, and I have a study lesson on decimals. What is it? This lesson is called Combining and Representing Decimals. And how many rows did you follow there? One. The students are combining decimals together using a representation, and they get to play a game also, so they love that. So this game is called Fill 2. Say that, Fill 2. What you're going to do is you're going to play a game with these 10 by 10 squares and these little tiny decimal cards. These decimal cards have decimals on them. They have 10 and they have 100 on them. Our goal is to turn over the decimal card, color the decimal we have, and then every time we get a new decimal, we're going to use a new what? A new color. Yeah, a new color. Okay? Okay, so she's got one print she's going to color in one row on her chart. And then we can't use that card anymore, so we're going to put it face down back in the pile. And you're going to keep taking things like that until you fill up 2 squares. And once they're all filled up and there's nothing more you can do, you're going to add all of the decimals that you have together. And then the winner is the person who gets closest to the number 2. First, I model the game for the students, and then I break them up into partners, and I have them group that. And while they're playing, I walk around, and I see what they're doing and make sure that they understand the difference between the tens and the hundreds. Is it 7,500? So why don't you get a new paper and why don't you get it to fill it in, okay? And then you're going to submit it. Well, that is the game, but if you want to really pay, not really fair. So students have a lot of trouble when looking at the difference between the tens and hundreds. They see 5 tens as 500 sometimes, so they get confused very often. So the game kind of helps to reinforce that. This is a nice bit into a unit and decimals because the students are recognizing the difference between the tens and hundreds, and then they're combining them together. So they'll be ready when we move on and they can add the decimals together without using the representation. I mean, I've got 100. You got it already? Now, the other because it's a game and they used to compete against each other. That's really exciting. They love to play a game room or if they have a tie or a tiebreaker. A lot of these students are English language learners, and it's helpful to put them in groups because they can use the math vocabulary while they're conversing with their peers. Okay, Rita, tell us what you had. You said 8900 plus 5 cells plus 3 tenths plus 5 tenths plus 2 tenths equals 2 and 600. I think you would love this lesson on decimals because the students are learning how to add decimals together using a visual, and they're also working with partners and having a lot of fun working in groups and talking with each other. The resources I'm giving you are the lesson plan, the directions to play the game, and everything you need to play the game with your students.
So the poll is rate the Fill 2 lesson as a deep understanding technique. So if you'll take a moment to fill that out now, and I'll share the results. So it looks like that 100% of the participants said that she was accomplished.
That's so interesting that everybody's seeing it the same way. And if anyone has tips, please type them in. Here's another thinking quote done by a woman this time. She was a suffragette and a pacifist. She was a speaker all around the world, and Mark Twain very much admired her and helped to finance her education at Radcliffe. And when she did graduate from Radcliffe, she was the first deafblind person to have done so. Helen Keller. So let's move on to higher order thinking. What is it? It's asking questions and implementing strategies to ensure analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So I didn't budget in enough time to show a video on this, but if I had, we would have seen a video of students debating. And when students debate, they really do have to use higher order thinking in order to successfully prove one point over another, and especially when they respond to their opponents, that does require higher order thinking and can be done by students as young, I've done it as young as 4th grade. I don't know if anyone in the audience has had experience with even younger kids, but that is a way that higher order thinking can be demonstrated, and when you measure it against the rubric, it's really a very good activity. So we're going to move on to the 4th part of the rubric, which is solving problems, and that's defined as understanding and resolving problems independently, generating and testing hypotheses. And for solving problems, these are the categories from the rubric, and they're the same for the teacher and the student, involving problem complexity, problems without solutions, and problem-solving processes. So we're going to take a look at an approach to problem solving called relevant problem solving. And let's see how Dan sets up his lesson, and I want you to assess whether or not this is going to require problem solving on the part of the students.
Hi, my name is Dan Meyer. I taught high school math for 6 years to students who did not like math, and now I'm on a doctoral fellowship at Stanford studying curriculum design and teacher education. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a camera out, a video camera or a photo camera, and I'm taking a picture of that real-world scenario in such a way that the question that's buried at the bottom, the last step of the textbook problem, is the first thing on that student's mind. I want to make that question irresistible to a student, so they have to know the answer. Then I take that interest and I layer math on top of it. Our goal in my classes is to let math serve conversation, to let math serve prediction and betting and arguing, not the other way around. We don't do all of that to serve the math. So here's an example, is I took a flip camera out, little cheap camera, put it on a tripod, and I shot a basketball shot in front of it. And then I took that video file and I just carved it up and I made this half video where the ball kind of strobes in the air and then hovers halfway between me and the hoop. And that's a good moment because I don't have to ask the question there. You know what the question is. The students are feeling the question, is that ball going to go in the hoop? And from there, I can take bets and predictions. We all put a guess on the record. I show a few more shots, some that obviously are going to miss, some that may make it. And from there, you want to know the answer. Am I right or wrong? And so I throw you into a simulator where you are modeling the parabola on top of that, and you can see, like, okay, it's going to continue and miss or go in. And the best part about using multimedia in these instances, one of the great parts, is that I don't have to turn to the back of the teacher's edition and tell you, well, the textbook says you're right. Or as a teacher, I say you're right. We just watch the end of the video. And from that, I can be a co-learner with my students. Like, we're working on it here, and they're asking me, am I right? And I'm saying, beats me. Let's find out. It's a good moment. Another example is the classic boat in the river problem, which students on paper have a hard time wrapping their heads around it, where you have a kayaker going upstream and downstream. So I'm thinking, where can I find an upstream and a downstream in my day-to-day life? And take the camera out there and film it. And it occurs an escalator. I can walk up the down escalator and it's going against the current. So I take the camera, I shoot it, and then I set the end of the video up in such a way that the question on everybody's mind is, how long is it going to take him to go up the down escalator? You see me pause there, and it's hard not to think that question. And from there, we take guesses. What do you think? 1 minute, 2 minutes, 10 seconds? I'll ask you for, what do you know is a wrong answer? I'll ask you, my struggling learner, for a wrong answer. Give me a number that's too high, that's too low. And from there, I'm involving students at a very low investment that has huge returns, because you're setting error bounds on your answer already. Well, here's an example. How long will it take to fill up a water tank? You got a hose, it's filling up the tank slowly, agonizingly slowly, and pretty soon you're wondering, man, how long is it going to take to fill this up? And from there, you have to ask a question that is nowhere in textbooks that I've used. It's to ask the question, what information do I need to solve this problem? Textbook usually gives you that information. Whereas here, you've got to ask yourself, what matters? Does the height of the tank matter? Does the flow rate matter? And then we give you that info. You look the problem out, and we can show you the answer. You can fast forward to the end of the video and see how long it took to fill up that water tank. It's a harder and more fun problem than what my textbook offers my students. It's asking them to do more, and they're having more fun doing it. And that's a crazy kind of double win.
All right. So that's an interesting approach to math. And if we're focusing on problem solving, could you please take the poll and let us know whether you think this is beginning, developing, accomplished, exemplary? Are you there, Honor?
Sorry, I am actually sharing it now. We actually, this is the fill 2.
Yeah, no, it's actually a blank one.
Yeah. 1 second. Okay, I am launching it right now.
Okay.
Okay. All right. It looks like we have actually, I can close the poll and share it. On this one, Kathleen, we had 100% of participants voted exemplary. I think I would agree. That was kind of very neat.
Yes. So you can see it's getting better and better, and using the rubric, I think even if you went point by point, that this is a very strong approach to the lesson. So I'm presuming there aren't going to be tips, but if there are some tips, please feel free to offer them on how to strengthen the lesson. And so we have one more thinker. Oh,
Yeah.
did it?
Kathleen, you're
did it come across?
Yeah, can you just go ahead and launch your slideshow?
Oh, yes. So I guess my little animation failed here. So we have Thomas Edison, who was actually educated for 3 months and then didn't work out very well, so he was homeschooled for the rest of his educational career. He founded 14 countries, and he holds 1,093 patents, and that's just in the U.S. He has patents in Europe as well. But he says 85% of people would rather die than think. So, Honor, we have some resources that are available for our participants. And you and I talked a little bit about how to go into the NAESP website and look at the Common Core materials for the checklist. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, thank you. A lot of what Kathleen has gone over with you is the material that comes from our Roadmap to Rigor workshop for schools. Of course, this is a full-day workshop that could be used with K-12 teams or with your staff, with teachers. And of course, what we wanted to do with this to give you kind of a preview of some of the depth that goes into this workshop. And so in a very brief, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, we've tried to give you samples of activities that kind of the facilitator will actually get into in metacognition, higher order thinking, deep understanding, and solving problems. And some of the kinds of depth of the rubric that they use. This Rigor Rubric is really kind of the basis for launching this whole workshop, and it kind of really teaches people how to think about rigor. What we've tried to do is show you that here's just a screenshot of the where you can get more information about the Roadmap to Rigor workshop. It's off of our NAESP site under Learning Center. Actually, it's going to be under Resources. That's probably under Resources. And I would encourage you to check it out and to think about, getting a workshop where you can really dive deep with your faculty or your staff or teachers or whatever into rigor. Kathleen, do you want to say more about it? Because she's one of our facilitators for this workshop.
I can just say that I've given it to principals, groups of principals, and that works well. And I've given it to principal teams where they bring a couple of key faculty members, and I think that's even better.